Open that drawer. You know the one, in the kitchen, or in some cabinet nobody else ever touches, where 3 cables sit that you can't match to anything, 2 batteries that are probably dead, a key that doesn't open anything you can remember, and a plastic bag stuffed full of other plastic bags. You know it's there. You know you haven't touched a single thing inside it in months, maybe years. And still, every time someone suggests throwing it out, something in you resists. Not with logic, with something deeper, something you can't quite name but that says, clearly, no, this could be useful someday. And the strange part? That someday almost never comes. But the feeling that it might is enough for the thing to stay. If you've ever wondered why you do this, the answer isn't clutter, it isn't laziness, and it's definitely not hoarding. Psychology has a far more interesting explanation, and it probably has to do with things that happened long before that drawer ever existed. That little phrase, just in case, is the key to all of it. Because it isn't a rational decision about the object, it's an emotional statement about the future. And that's exactly where this gets interesting. There are 3 very different reasons why you keep things you'll probably never use, and each one says something completely different about who you are. The first is the most common and the hardest to see. It's the memory of scarcity. Some people hold on to objects because at some point in their life, or in their parents' lives, or their grandparents', not having something when it was needed had real consequences. Not abstract ones, concrete ones. There was no money to replace it. There was no store nearby. There was no quick way to get another. And that experience, even if it happened decades ago, left a mark on the way the brain measures the value of things. Psychologists who study economic behavior call it a scarcity mindset. When a brain has lived through real lack, it permanently recalibrates what things are worth. An old cable isn't trash, it's a potential resource. An empty box isn't cardboard, it's future protection. A plastic bag isn't waste, it's usefulness waiting in storage. And here's what's fascinating. This gets passed down between generations. You don't have to have lived through the scarcity yourself. It's enough to have grown up in a house where everything was saved, where throwing out something useful felt almost like a sin. Those rules get installed in childhood without anyone ever putting them into words. You learn them by watching. And as an adult, when you think about tossing that cable, the voice that says, "No, wait," isn't even yours. It belongs to someone who learned that wasting was dangerous. For a lot of families, that memory runs deep. Whole generations grew up with the idea that what you have, you take care of, because you never know when it'll come back around. And that idea doesn't vanish with a steady paycheck. It stays running quietly in the background, a program that never fully closes. But there's a second type, and this one is less obvious. Some people keep objects not out of fear of scarcity, but out of a need for control. Their drawer of stuff isn't a box of memories or an insurance policy against the future. It's a system. Every saved object represents a possibility covered, a scenario planned for, a variable controlled. If something breaks someday, I've got the spare. If I ever need to wrap something, I've got the box. If the power goes out, I've got the candles from 3 Christmases ago. These just-in-cases aren't random. They're strategic. The person keeping them does it because having things ready gives them a sense of security they need in order to function. Researchers who study anticipatory anxiety describe exactly this. When someone feels the future is unpredictable, they look for ways to create predictability. You can't control what happens tomorrow, but you can control what you have on hand when it comes. The catch is that the security is an illusion, but the act of keeping still does its job. It doesn't protect you from the future. It protects you from the anxiety of thinking about the future. And here's the connection almost nobody makes. A lot of these people are the same ones who plan everything, who keep lists, who need to know the plan before they walk out the door. The drawer of saved objects is just one more piece of a preventive control system the brain built to feel safe. And then there's a third type, and this one is probably the most surprising. Some people keep objects because letting go hurts. Not the object itself, what it represents. That old shirt that doesn't fit anymore, but that was your favorite at 20. The charger for a phone that no longer exists. The box from the sneakers you bought with your first real paycheck. These things aren't kept for their use. They're kept because they're emotional anchors. They're the physical proof that something happened, that an era existed, that a person was there. And letting go feels, on a level that has nothing to do with logic, like letting go of the memory itself. Psychologists call this the extended self. Certain possessions become so deeply woven into who you are that they stop being objects and start being fragments of you. Throwing them out isn't cleaning a drawer, it's amputating a piece of your own history. And this gets especially intense in people who have lost something that mattered. Not material things, people, relationships, chapters of a life. The object becomes the last thread connecting you to something that's no longer here, and letting it go feels like the final confirmation that it's really over. That isn't clutter, it's grief, disguised as a drawer. And here's the part that deserves your attention. Keeping things isn't a problem in itself. It's a deeply human behavior, and it has legitimate psychological roots. But there's a point where it stops being caution and turns into something else. When the space the saved things take up starts to shrink the space you need to live. When the thought of throwing something away creates more distress than the discomfort of keeping it. When you hold on to things not because you're going to use them, but because letting go feels like a loss. At that point, the object stopped serving you. You started serving the object. And here's the question almost nobody asks themselves. Do you keep things because they might be useful, or because letting them go forces you to accept something you're not ready to accept yet? There doesn't have to be some dramatic answer, but the next time you open that drawer and your hand stops before it drops something in the trash, notice what you feel, not what you think, what you feel. Because the difference between "this could be useful" and "I can't let this go" is the distance between a habit and a wound. And if it's a habit, no harm done. Close the drawer and get on with your day. But if it's a wound, well, now at least you know where to look. If any of this sounded familiar, a quiet comment is enough. And if these deeper corners of psychology interest you, subscribe, because the next video might explain something else about you that you haven't discovered yet.